Hi everybody, I am here refuting Ethan's speech, and his main claim was that hybrid cars have a significant negative impact on the environment. His supporting claims were that the production of cars is a very dirty process, and that the production of power in most cities is a very dirty process. My main claim, however, is in contrast to his claim. I say that hybrid cars do, in fact, have a positive effect on the environment. So his first supporting claim was that the production of cars is a very dirty process. He brought up how China ignores environmental safety protocols by tainting their own water with the acid waste from the mining of nickel, which is made in some hybrid batteries. Though he is right, China is greatly harming themselves with their own waste. He fails to tell you that this was their own choice. Japan is the original maker of hybrid/electrical cars, and they saw that China had these cheaper earth metals, which was lithium and nickel, and they said, if you want to transport them to us, that's chill. Either way, don't matter, give or take a little bit. So then China decided to mine on themselves because it was cheaper production. So this type of production is not the norm. This is strictly just China. And let's be real here. The last of China's worries when it comes to environmental safety, it is a tad bit of acid waste coming from mining nickel. Not to mention, the Prius battery is actually made up of 12 small batteries, which aren't just thrown away when they're empty. Hybrids use an NIMH battery, and these batteries can be recharged as well as recycled. According to Ron Kogan, the editor of the Green Car Journal, he said, nickel metal hydride batteries are benign. They can be fully recycled. In fact, Toyota puts a phone number on each battery, and they pay a $200 bounty for each battery found and recorded to them to help ensure that it will be properly disposed of. And the lifespan of a hybrid battery is much longer than most people think. Mark Berman, the author for the Science Monitoring newspaper, said generally when you're charging your device battery, you're charging it to 100%, then you're taking it all the way down to 0. However, when it comes to hybrid cars such as the Toyota Prius, it will only go to about 80% of a maximum capacity to avoid overcharging. And then when it goes back down, it stops at about 20%. So this gives the battery a much longer life than the actual car itself. So it will outlive its car and be reused. So then Ethan's second supporting claim was that the production of electricity that powers the cars is a very dirty process. He brought up how power plants mostly run on coal, which emit large amounts of carbon dioxide. According to a study spearheaded by Mr. Lindsay Wilson, a author for the Energy Collective Journal, he said the average American gasoline vehicle adds up to about 300 grams of CO2 per kilometer, while a new hybrid might manage about 180 grams. And that is after vehicle manufacturing, fuel combustion, and fuel production. So even in the very end of it, hybrid cars are emitting significantly less greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And I would like to direct you to his bibliography. One of his main sources was dated back all the way to 2007, and that's only a few years after the Prius was introduced in America. 2007 was 6 years ago. A lot has changed, not only in the Prius, but in the country. So I wouldn't say that is a very trustworthy source, being so old. Another one of his sources, named Full Fuel Cycle Assessment Tank 2 Wheels, Emissions, and Energy Consumption, states, and I quote, "This report has not been approved by the California Energy Commission, nor has the California Energy Commission passed upon the accuracy or adequacy of the information in this report." He conveniently left this important piece of information out. Any listener who would know such a thing would immediately question the sufficiency of this information. So in conclusion, I disagree with Ethan's main claim as well as his supporting claims, which stated that hybrid cars have a negative effect on the environment.
Okay, you've ID'd the main and secondary claims very clearly, so it's structurally easy to follow. When you get to the first supporting point, you've got an identification there. You summarize the point pretty effectively. You make this argument that it ultimately comes down to it's a choice of the Chinese. I need to know why that matters. If the argument is about whether or not it's polluting or whether it is dangerous for the environment, how is the choice relevant? I guess the argument might ultimately be that it's a self-imposed harm, and that especially if there are ways to minimize that harm, those could ultimately be adopted, then I understand it a little bit. But if the argument is just about whether or not it has a negative effect on the environment, I'm not sure that the fact that it's a choice matters, at least not without getting into a value argument. Also, you kind of dismiss and suggest that it's a minor risk about the potential leakage into the water paths of the acidic runoff. But there's no evidence on that particular point, so when you minimize that, it's really, you kind of poo-poo it without saying, well, they got bigger problems. Well, that might be true, but that doesn't diminish the fact that this is potential harm. I think you needed a little bit better information on that point. The argument about the battery recycling I thought was a little bit stronger, because you talk about how the batteries are going to last for a longer period of time. It increases their lifespan. There's a bounty for them. If, for instance, the biggest danger from the batteries is the leakage, and the batteries are unlikely to be disposed of in the environment, and instead they're going to be recycled, that seems like it's a good argument to make, and you do an okay job on that. I think you could explain a little bit more how it's relevant to the pollution cycle. The signpost on the second point was also very clear. You did a good job comparing the amount of CO2 released by the different types of vehicles. I thought that was pretty effective. Although the advocate was talking about electric cars also, I think, so not just hybrid vehicles, and the energy that has to be produced by power plants in order to get the electricity for those vehicles, that issue you don't quite really address, and so I'm not sure that your argument entirely answers the point, but it's a good counterclaim there. There's an attack on the 2007 evidence that's presented, which is not an unreasonable attack. However, you should point out what is different about hybrids from 2007 to today, and in fact, if the technology has changed in some way and that makes that information less valid, that would strengthen your argument there. The general criticism of the evidence I thought was okay. I'm not sure why anybody needs to get approval from the California Energy Commission in order to cite a study, but the fact that it doesn't have approval does seem to suggest that there's no independent authority that's concluding this, so maybe that's the way you want to present that. All right, thank you.